Hello, this is the January 30th, 2012 issue of United Nations Week News and Views. My name is John Kerry, and I alone am responsible for views expressed on this program unless I indicate some other source. It is unusually warm for the late January period we're now passing through, and I suppose this is what in Greece is called halcyon days. I understand that in ancient times there were flocks of birds who even now come flying back to Greece, or some part of it, during mid or late January, and at the time of their arrival, warm weather is normally expected. And those birds were known as halcyon. We pronounce it halcyon, and these are indeed halcyon days. Well, the first subject I want to get into is far from halcyon because it's the Holocaust and the remembrance of the Holocaust that occurs every year at the United Nations. On January 27th, the following statement was made by U.S. Deputy Permanent Representative Rosemary DiCarlo. Quote, "The theme of this day of remembrance is particularly apt and particularly painful. Usually when we remember the Holocaust, we remember the adults who perished. After all, they had left some record of their lives. They had made some impression in the world. They had done things that could be remembered, and so they were remembered by many, and above all, by the family members and friends who had escaped being devoured. The children were different," said Rosemary DiCarlo. "They never had a chance to leave their mark. They are so painful to remember because their futures, their lives, were stolen in their entirety. And of course their murder is of a particular kind in that it lays absolutely bare the horror of the Holocaust. Whatever mad delusions the authors of the Holocaust had about Jews as the enemy, these could hardly apply to children. This was genocide, simply and completely." Mr. DiCarlo went on to say, "Perhaps this is why the Diary of Anne Frank, when it was published in the 1950s, hit the world with such force and continues to do so. In the summer of 1942, soon after she began keeping her diary, and not long before she and her family went into hiding, Anne Frank wrote, quote, "It seems to me that later on neither I nor anyone else will be interested in the musings of a 13-year-old schoolgirl," unquote. This is one of the few times when this wise young girl was utterly wrong. Rosemary DiCarlo went on to say, "Anne Frank left us an account of something that is rarely set down, a child's innocent life as faithfully recorded by herself. She made the abstract real and made our loss concrete. She helped us never to forget." There are actually some, incredible as it may seem, who would deny that this Holocaust took place or seek to minimize it as simply another episode in the long history of mankind's crimes. But evidence matters. There is more than enough of it, and it lasts. We will fight denial for as long as it takes. We will fight it for the sake of all those children who perished. Rosemary DiCarlo went on to say, "For those children did survive the horror and went on to enrich our societies. Many went to Israel and to the United States between 1945 and 1952. More than 80,000 survivors moved to the United States. Some came later. Many have taken prominent positions that promote a better society, justice, respect for human rights, respect for religion. People like Dr. Ruth Westheimer and Rabbi Arthur Schneier. I would like to pay tribute to them and the other survivors who are here today. It is an honor to be in your presence and to represent the United States in commemorating all the children who were lost. Elie Wiesel once said, "Memory has become the sacred duty of all people of goodwill," unquote. On this day of remembrance, the United States stands with all those who pledge never to forget. End of the statement from the Deputy Representative of the United States at the UN. Now I turn to a completely different subject, one that is seldom mentioned in all of the discussion that we hear about satellites and objects being launched into space and orbiting around the Earth. Don't forget that some of these things don't come back. They just stay up there around and around and around. And this is what we call space debris. A UN Secretariat note on national research on space debris, safety of space objects with nuclear power sources on board, and problems relating to their collision with space debris, cited the website of the UN Office for Outer Space Affairs, www.unoosa.org, where a Japanese report on space debris-related activities in Japan will be made available. On page 5 of the Secretariat note, the following from Japan's report appears under a heading of Investigation of Impact Damage. This is a quote from the Japanese report. Historically, debris impact damages have been investigated for manned systems to confirm the impact of debris of several millimeters. Millimeters. That's 1/1000th of a meter. A meter is about the same as a yard in size. However, since a usual satellite tends to be damaged even by debris smaller than 1 millimeter, additional data are needed. Debris impact damages of satellites are investigated by hypervelocity impact experiments, and then damage limit equations are developed. As the impact experiment can hardly cover speeds higher than 10 kilometers per second. What do you think 10 kilometers per second equals in miles an hour? According to my calculations, it's 36,000 miles per hour. So, as the impact experiment can hardly cover speeds higher than 10 kilometers per second, numerical simulation is essential to verify the effects caused by velocities of 10 kilometers per second or higher, unquote. That's from the Japanese report. Now, a Swiss report is quoted in this Secretariat report to say, quote, "The population of space debris has increased drastically in recent years through explosions of deactivated satellites and collisions. The situation is particularly critical in the low Earth orbit, LEO for acronym. Long-term predictions show a risk of a self-feeding collision cascading effect, a self-feeding collision cascading effect called Kessler, K-E-S-S-L-E-R, Kessler syndrome, if no measures are taken." Well, that's a problem of immense proportions, which here in this Secretariat report has been suggested to us. When you think of all the debris, of course, it's mostly very small and mostly spaced wide apart. But nevertheless, if manned space vehicles are up there in the presence of even these tiny 1 millimeter particles that are proceeding at such enormous speeds around the Earth, the potential for harm is very significant and has to be studied and planned for. And so I understand it will be. I certainly hope so. Well, friends, that's all for this January 30th, 2012 issue of United Nations Week News and Views. We'll be back with the next issue. Meantime, do send along your own ideas, reactions on these or other UN-related issues to www.unweek.blogspot.com. Goodbye for now, and thank you very much for watching.